Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Okay, so as promised, we're going to be talking about fades and different ways of saving your work. And I know all of us have had that moment where, like, oh my god, I wish I didn't do that. It wasn't undoable. Like, say you delete a track and it had a bunch of editing on it, and can't go back to it, and you don't want to go to your clips list to try to extract all the files and put them back in order. I'll show you really simple, easy ways to help alleviate any stress and hopefully make it more adventurous for you to try new things, knowing that you can always revert back to different versions of your session. But first, let's go over fades. Okay, so fades only apply to audio tracks, audio clips, right? So you can't do fades on a MIDI track, which is nice because there's no brushing up you have to do between these two edit points here. But on audio tracks, you definitely have to. And just to show you that, I have these clips I showed you guys on the last video of this little rattle sound. Okay, but you're gonna notice something. I had fades on it previously. I took all the fades off, and I want to show you just what this sounds like without any fades on it, and you might notice something different. You might be hearing in your left eardrum that there's this little popping sound that happens every so often, right? That is due to not applying a fade before a clip, right? So in most instances, we talked about this a little bit before, but in most instances, when you make a break, you're going to want to do it in a moment of silence, a space where there's no sound happening. The reason for it is that this waveform. Let's go to one where this is really audible and really visually easy to see. A waveform. Let me also clean this up and just bring up this one so we can see it a little bit larger. All a waveform is doing, obviously, is the shape of the sound, right? It kind of tells us like this is a low frequency because it's really long. This is a high frequency because it's really short and narrow. But the other thing it does, it tells the speaker when to push air out and when to pull air in, like, and move back and forth. So anytime you see the waveform above this center line here, is telling the speaker to push out, to move outward. And anytime it goes down, it tells the speaker to suck inward, to pull inward, right? So when you start an edit, when you start a playback where there's no clip, like in this area, the speaker is at rest, right? And then right when you tell it immediately to jump up to this point, no speaker can do it that quickly, and you get this audible pop sound that happens there. Let me just play over that one little clip. It'll go by fast, but try to listen for it. Oh, let's solo it too. You hear that? It also happens at the end of that clip too, right? So the best way to prevent that is to make an edit that's not. Make an edit that is, first let's switch our edit mode, and make an edit that's not on the grid. And you can see it's kind of hard to do that on this track, but if you do it right there, you'll hear that the edit actually gets cleaned up a little bit. And if we do this one here, that little pop sound won't be as audible. So that's one way to do it. Let's see. Pretty interesting, right? But if you don't have time to go over each and every one, or you did a bunch of work already, and you're like, oh man, like, is there a simple way? You can just fade across it. So let's do that. So no matter if you started here, or even if you made an edit right there or something like that, you can still fix that with a fade. How do we apply fades in Pro Tools? Well, you can do a couple things. You can select over the end of the clip, go to edit, fade, and then create fade. And then this dialog box will pop up. Say if you want to, it knows that you want to create a fading because you're at the beginning of a clip. Say okay. So that's one way to do it. You can delete fades without deleting a clip by grabbing them with the grabber tool and hitting delete. Let's show another way. You can select it and then hit the key command for that, which is Command F. Right? That pulls in the fade in dialog box and say okay as well. But let's say you want to, let me undo that. Let me grab the fade, delete. Let's say you want to just automatically add a fade really, really quickly, right? Well, you can do that. Let's highlight it, hit the letter F. And since we're in keyboard focus mode, it does it automatically. Now you can see that the fade shape is a little bit different than the one I had done previously. Let me undo, Command F. See how that one's nice and straight, yet then when I hit the letter F, we get this curved kind of, what they call an exponential fade in. That is because, pull up my keyboard here as well. That is because I have preset what the value of my fade, what I want the value of my fades in my session to be, right? So anytime I hit F, it automatically knows I want to do that type of fade, right? Same with fade outs. If we select, hit the letter F, we have this different slope for the fade outs. So let me show you how you do that. If you go up to Setup, Preferences, believe it is Processing. No. Oh, Editing. And then go into your fade section here. If you click on any of these 4 boxes, you can set the preset value of your fade. Let's go to fade in. You can see that I have a slight curve to my fade ins there. If we go to my fade outs, you'll see just a straight linear fade out, right? But if I change that to be, if I click and grab in this dialog box, we can see that I can change the value of my my fade, which is really great. And then there's crossfades, which is just joining 2 clips together that are right next to each other, right? You can crossfade between clips, right? You can also set the value that you want this. If you want to cheat it to the left or the right, or just have it right down the middle, we can change different curves to it if we wanted. We can add the in shape can be different than the out shape. Right? So all these things are kind of connected together, which is great. We can also visualize, if we had something selected, we can visualize what those audio tracks look like, but we have to have something selected in our edit region, okay? So I'm going to keep this crossfade like that. So that's normally how I have it. I'm going to say okay. And now, every time I add a fade with the letter F, it's going to apply that fade value that I had set to it, right? So that's pretty cool. Let me show you something else. I'll show you a crossfade. There's a couple ways to make a crossfade. Now, I can do the same thing where I select over it with the selector tool. Remember, you can't do it with the grabber tool. And then hit the letter F, and that'll automatically create the crossfade. Or if you don't have to select over it, if you just go down to the bottom left corner of the region of the clip that you're trying to crossfade over, see how it turns into that little X icon? That's our crossfade icon. And if I click and drag on that, then I can create a customized length of my crossfade, which is nice. Once the crossfade is created, you can actually edit the crossfade by using your trim tool, moving it to the left, moving it to the right, using the grabber tool and moving it to different parts, and you can actually see how it modifies the waveform underneath, which is cool. And then if you were to delete it, the edit that you had previously would show up in the same spot that it was before. So not only that, if we select multiple clips like this and hit the letter F, we can make a crossfade at every single point. A crossfade, a fade in, and fade out across the entire clip, right? So what would prevent us from crossfading everything in this whole track? Well, nothing. Let's try it. Click on the first clip, or grab it with the grabber tool, and then shift grab with the grabber tool on the last clip, which selects everything in between. Hit the letter F. Let's listen back to see if we have any of those pops. Pretty good, right? And we've maintained the rhythm of our track as well. So when in a very short amount of steps, we've been able to fade in, fade out, crossfade just from that dialog box that we had set up, right? So experiment with that, customize it the way you see fit, and start using that in some of the examples we're doing when we're making, especially working with samples. Really, really fast, easy tool to use. One other way we can do a fade. If we select an entire clip or two clips that could have fade ins, fade outs, and crossfades, if we do Command F, we can have a separate in the same dialog box have and customize each different fade that we have selected in our track. If we don't have anything selected and hit Command F, nothing happens, right? As you can see from the keyboard down below. But that means we have to have a clip selected, Command F, and that pulls this up. And then this will tell us what our options are. What's nice is that you can set the length of each fade in and fade out. So let's say I want this one to be really short, 5 milliseconds. I want this crossfade to be 20 milliseconds. Let's have this one be, I think the limit is 1 second. Let's see if I can do that. Yeah, that's too much. Yeah, so adjust to fit. So anytime you get this dialog box, it's telling you, the fade length you've selected exceeds the clip bounds of one or more of the clips. That just means that one of these clips, you're asking it to maybe fade further, like say this clip right here, right? Like say, what this usually means is that the recording or the clip itself is only maybe like this long, but we're asking it to fade this long, but there's no audio recorded beyond this point, if that makes sense, right? So what is this saying? Hey, do you just want to adjust it so that it fits within the clip? And I say, and usually, almost always, you just say adjust to fit. And you can see how that clip has changed. That clip is less than a second long, but I asked it to do a second fade, right? But let's change that. And let's go back to something more reasonable. Let's say 10 milliseconds, which is our default. Say OK. And there we are. Cool. Moving on. So now we're getting into undoing our work. Okay, so now obviously we can hit undo till the cows come home, but there is a limitation. You're only allowed 64 undos in your session. I believe you can see that in your preferences. And then down at the bottom of your editing tab here, you can see how many levels of undo you have. The max is 64. You can make it have less, but I'm not sure how how important that is to have less undos. Maybe just to prevent someone from just hitting Command Z 64 times and not reverting. But that's the maximum for our undos. So let's see how many undos I've done in a session. You actually, Pro Tools keeps track of every single edit that you undo in a window known as the undo history window. And here is all the undos I've done, okay? Now you can see how a clip nudge, each nudge is one level of undo. So if you're hitting nudge, 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 and you're trying to undo to like the point that you were at, you can be going back very like what is this, 20 different levels of undo. So instead of doing that, you can pull up this dialog box, and if you select an operation that you had done beyond a certain point, you can just automatically snap to that level of undo that you had done without having to hit Command Z a million times, right? So if I want to go back, oh, let's see, I grab this MIDI event or this note ending or let's say I want to start like where I started showing how to create fades, right? So right here, I want to go back to this level of undo. If I hit that, I can see that I've undone all my fades, right? And not only that, any editing I've done in between here that I had shown you guys, I can go back to where I started this lesson, right? So pretty cool functionality. Um, you can also go forward too. It saves the ones that you had in previous times, so you can go back and forth. This is not corrupting my file at all. But one thing to be very cautious of is that if you save and then quit your session, this undo history gets deleted. So you can't just open up your session, go to this undo history, and then assume that all your undos that you had previously are still there. They'll be gone. Okay, so be aware of that, right? So with that in mind, you can actually delete this undo history and say undo all. This will just go back to the first, the level of undo, and you can clear your entire undo history, right? So I normally don't do this because I like to have this isn't taking up processing power or like a lot of um, processing on your computer. So there's no reason to actually clear this unless you're trying to like start fresh. I'm going to redo all right now. But if you wanted to, you can. Also, if that comes up on the exam, you can answer that correctly. Can you clear your undo history? Yes, you can. How many levels of undo can you have? 64. And so on. So yeah, pretty cool stuff with the undo history window. You can also just hit Command Z to go through that undo history list like we've been doing. Or if you go into the file, the edit menu and go to undo whatever the last operation you did, right? Now, remember, there are some things that you cannot undo, right? Those things include deleting tracks, can't undo. Closing a session or quitting Pro Tools, you can't undo that. Clearing audio from the clips list. So if you were to go into your clips list and clear any of your selected tracks in here, you cannot undo that. They'll be gone forever from your clips list. And then we don't go over this a lot in this class, but there's something called destructive recording or destructive editing. It sounds as serious. It is as serious as it sounds. That just means that any editing that you do or any clips that you delete in that mode will be gone forever immediately, right? But obviously, we are not in that mode in Pro Tools right now, and we won't be in this class because we like to be able to be a little more flexible. Moving on here. So there's a couple of new features in the newer versions of Pro Tools. So let's say you're at and there's a couple of just standard version things that you can do in Pro Tools. So let me move this over here for a second. Make this track a little bit smaller. Let's say you had a version of your session that you like right now, right? And then you're going to add like a drum part or something, or you're going to move on to another form of editing, or you wanted to do like an arrangement or something. But you just want to be able to come back to this exact point in your session um, without um, without hurting anything, right? A really simple way of doing that, and this is true in a lot of programs, is there's something called a save as function. Okay, now what a save as does in Pro Tools, it creates what's known as a PTX file, right? So it will save it in the session folder that you're in. You don't have to navigate to it; it'll automatically come up to whatever your session folder is. But you just might want to double check that it is the correct session that you're in, and then just name it something in particular. I usually like to go by mix 1, 2, 3, 4. So in this case, I might go with mix 4, and then some type of descriptive title, like whatever your next session is going to be. So PCC arrange, right? Because maybe I'm gonna add an arrangement or something. I'm gonna move some things around. Hit save. And now I can do anything this session. I can be like super adventurous. I can move stuff around. I can be completely reckless with my moves here and be like, oh, you know what? I don't like that I did that. I don't want to go through the undo history. Maybe I've done over 64 operations. I just want to go back to where I was before. Not a problem. Let's go to File, Open Recent, and then the session you had before, mix 3. You can also do that from your Finder and from the session you're on. So in this case, I'm in my PCC. I have Lab 5 here, and then this mix 3 arrangement that I have here. Yeah, sure. I'll save that session there. You don't have to if you don't like what you're seeing there. And now I'm back to where I was previously, with no sweat. So yeah, really easy stuff to do, and to be aware of. Now, let's say you did something else, where you deleted something or you did something where you can't undo, and you had just created it in the session, did all this editing, and you accidentally deleted it, right? Let's say you're doing a bunch of editing here, and you maybe move some stuff around, but at some point you can undo all those moves you just did, right? Easy. But let's say you do something you didn't want to do, which is, let's say, delete a track, even though there's a warning up here, right? I'm gonna say delete, and that track's gone, and you're like, oh my God, what have I done? I didn't mean to do that. My life is over. No, it's not. It's actually really easy to go back to where you had started this session, right? Even if you've done a lot of levels of undo. Remember that in your clips list, whatever you bring in or import or record in Pro Tools or MIDI track you perform, it stays in this clips list no matter if you deleted it from this region here within your session. It's going to stay in this session here, okay? So it's going to stay in your clips list. So it's still there. But also, let's say you don't want, that you just want to go looking for your edit inside of this clips list and trying to piecemeal it back together. Let's do something really simple. Let's go to File and then revert to saved, meaning wherever this was at when I first opened it, I want to revert to that. It'll reopen the session, and there's my original edited clip, this second recording here. Oh my God, that saved me so much time, unbelievable amounts of time by doing that, right? Excellent. Um, uh, now, if you did that, if you deleted this track and then hit Command S and saved your session, that revert would not work, right? The revert to saved session um, w- uh, uh, would not suffice. You would not be able to get that track back, okay? But there's another way to get the track back. You have to be a little bit aware of the timeline that you've been creating things, but there's something called your session file backups, which we talked about at the beginning of this class. If I go to my Finder here and go to session file backups, I have a giant list of backups that Pro Tools is backing up, whether or not I'm saving the session or not. It is automatically backing up this session as we speak in a certain time intervals. Okay. Now, where you can customize that is in Setup, Preferences, and I believe Operations. Yes, this auto backup, enable session file auto backup. And it says keep 10 most recent session backups. I believe you can bump this up to 999. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's up to 1,000 backups if you wanted to. I'm actually going to bump this up to 50. And then backup every 5 minutes. So every 5 minutes, whether I'm hitting Command S or not, it saves a backup of my session, right? And then populates that session file backup list here. So if we were to wait 5 minutes, we would see backup 033 here and 034 and so on. Right? So it automatically does that. And then all you'd have to do is go back in time here and see, okay, when was this created? Today at 10:40 a.m. It's 10:48. I just deleted it, but let's say, when was this one made? 10:35. Okay, like that's about like where I was. You can double click on this and then open it. Oh, let's cancel this. And say, let's say we say don't save here. Say no. And then we're back to where we were previously with our session, right? This is where we're editing that clip back and forth earlier in this video here. So really cool ways of always being able to revert back to a session, not having to worry about whether you've saved something or not. It's actually pretty hard to lose material while working in Pro Tools. Unless your computer crashes when you're recording. That's about the only time you'd actually lose an audio file. Okay, or you actually go in and delete it from the clips list. Okay. Okay. So now this is open. See how it says recovered, and if I were to go to Command S to save, it's going to ask me, do you want to save it with that recovered at the end? No, we can just rename it and start our process over again. Instead of PCC arrange, let's say we're going to do PCC drums. We're going to add some, like a drum tracking session. And let's go with mix 5. Save. And now we're back on track. All right. So even if you delete a track, even if you've done a bunch of stuff that you don't, you want to go back to any part of your session, you can always do that with your levels of undo, with your revert to session, revert to previous session or saved session, or from your session file backups, which are auto backing up. Customize those things, customize your fades, and you guys should be good to go. All right. Thanks, guys. That concludes this lesson here. Make sure you're going over your review questions for that chapter, and I will see you guys at the next one. Good luck with the assignment you have this week. It's a fun one, and please come by my office hours if you have trouble with any, or if you have specific questions you'd like to ask. All right, thanks again, guys. See you next time.